Hi, I'm going to talk about why I have a shit ton of keyboard shortcuts. It's going to be cool. I'm not going to really edit this down, so sorry about that. But this is just a quick little vid. So basically, first I want to show you my hardware. I have a G903, has 11 programmable buttons. That comes in handy later. The Corsair K95 Platinum. I also have the standard camera sitting on top of a hacky sack that's taped to the top of a speaker with electrical tape. So first, to just kind of describe how my macro solution works, if you look at the side buttons on the left side of the mouse, G4 and G5, if you have a Logitech mouse, I'm using these two buttons to shift the function of the keyboard and scroll wheel into 4 different modes. So like if you're not holding any of them, it's just normal scrolling, normal keyboard. If you hold G4, there's application-specific macros and other scripts. And G5, numpad keys on the left of the keyboard. G4 and G5 is application switching. So I'll show the first mode, which is application-specific macros and other scripts. So if I have Notepad open, type some stuff, and maybe I want to copy this whole line. So on my keyboard, I'm actually going to show you this, and I'll... Okay, so you see that like there's some keys that are still lit up, and that's because I have macro functions on these keys. First, I have some line of text, I have another line of text, have another line of text. If I press G4, so we're switching to that first keyboard mode, and I press C, it'll basically press end, then hold shift down, press home, and then press Control C. So basically copy that line. And that's really nice for when you have scripts and you want to copy text into like any other program or something. I also have that same function that just highlights the line if you press G4 and press E. I also have a resize window function if I hold that button and press R. And then I also have minimize if I press G4 and press Z. So I have those functions, but then there's also some application specific functions. So first I'm going to open up After Effects because this is a place where I have functions like that. I also appreciate the new splash screen for After Effects. I think it's really just speaks to me as an artist, you know. All right, so After Effects opened up in a few seconds and not actually 5 minutes. So I'm going to add a new composition, add some nulls. So like I had the copy line, I had the highlight line, I had the resize window thing. But then if I hold that button and press A, I have this click on twirl button. So basically wherever your mouse is, it'll find the twirl closest to the mouse's Y position. And this is pretty useful for me. I also have cursor to mouse position. And now you can see that these are functions that only apply to After Effects. So they're application specific macros. Let's look at the next mode of functions. So G5, numpad keys to the left of the keyboard. So sometimes when you have some field selected here, you just want to type in a number quick. And now the numpad's really quick for typing in numbers quickly if you're already used to using a numpad. So I wanted to get used to using the numpad with my left hand, so that way I don't take my hand off of the mouse or take my left hand off of the left side of the keyboard. So when I hold G5 and I press ASD, it sends 1, 2, 3 because it's shifting AS and D to 1, 2, and 3. So when I have Notepad open, I'm holding G5 down. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And I was actually just pressing ASD, key WE, and 1, 2, and 3. So the numpad is on the left side of the keyboard. And I also have like symbols on the left side. I have math operators. And yeah, it's really nice for when you're clicking on a bunch of different fields that you have to enter numbers into. Next is G4 and G5 together. So when you hold both G4 and G5, there's the last mode for the keyboard, and that is application switching or launching. So if I press both buttons down and I press A, I have A linked to After Effects, so it'll switch to After Effects. And if I have it linked to 4, or I have a Notepad linked to 4, so when I press 4, it'll focus Notepad. If Notepad is not open and I press those two buttons down in 4, it'll open a new instance of Notepad. If I hold Control and press 4 with those two buttons held down, it'll open new instances of that window. Also works with File Explorer, so you'll press Control and E, it'll open new instances. You press E when there's multiple windows open, and it'll actually tab between those windows of that type. This script is inspired by Taran from Linus Tech Tips. Have a link to that just for funsies. But now, let's talk about the scroll wheel. So there's some tasks that are actually just faster with the scroll wheel because the scroll wheel is very good at sending a precise amount of keys or precise number of keystrokes in a very rapid succession. So like in some video games, some people would cheat by setting fire to the scroll wheel so that way they could like fire really fast for semi-automatic weapons. And so we're just using this cheat to place it on controls you might use in a rapid succession. So like in After Effects, if you press right and left and up and down, it'll move your selection around a little bit. And it's really good for fine adjustments as opposed to using the mouse and moving it. This is good for like a rough movement. But if you move it onto a spot and you want to just do some fine adjustments, I set it so that if you hold G4 and scroll, it'll send right and left. And you can see that I'm scrolling to move it. Now when you hold G4 and G5, it does up and down. You can see that when I hold G5 and scroll, it's scrubbing through frames. So that's very useful. So having the arrow keys on the mouse is really convenient because considering there's so many shortcuts that are associated with the arrow keys, and that's on the right side of the keyboard, which is a kind of like a no man's zone for useful keyboard shortcuts, I guess. Having them on the mouse is really nice. You should also have Enter and Delete on your mouse, just because those are such frequently used shortcuts, or there's so many shortcuts associated with those keys. And that's probably like the first step into using macros, is just putting Enter and Delete on your mouse. It's probably the lowest effort, highest benefit solution you can have. So yeah, we just talked about the scroll wheel. Next, I'm going to talk about kind of how this works. So if you already think this is cool, you can go ahead and just like, hey, just watched a cool video on keyboard shortcuts and macros, and I'm never going to use that because that's way too intense. But if you actually want to use this at some point, I do have my code in the description, so you can set this up, and I'm going to kind of talk about how to set this up a little bit later, but first I'm just going to talk about kind of how this works. So in order to get this to work, I had to have communication between Logitech and AutoHotkey. Logitech is really good at, or the Logitech gaming software is really good at like programming these mice. And AutoHotkey it's an easy enough scripting language and has deep enough control on Windows that you can pretty much do whatever you want with it. So by having these communicate, I can program this mouse a lot, and I can also get a lot of functionality in the OS. So there's another thing that I put into the Logitech mice, and that is multi-button macros. So normally the mouse comes with just 11 programmable buttons, and there's 9 reasonably remappable buttons. But if you use the scripting API and you just use some logic, you can get 27 macros out of it, and that's what I have. Now it's like, you're obviously not going to use all of these macros, but what this kind of allows is a more convenient organization of macros. But if you're insane, you can also use all of them too. So if you open up the Logitech gaming software, I'm going to go just to the default profile, go to scripting. And so this is where these scripts live that basically drive the mouse. So it's just a bunch of code. No one cares. Save that code. And then I have this code. So basically this is everything that runs my macros. So I have one master macro script. It detects what application you're focused on, and if you're on an application that isn't registered with the script. So if it's in an unregistered application, it'll basically just use a default profile. And then I have global functions, which are functions that are active on every single profile, like the numpad switching or the application switching. So you can see like After Effects, if you press A or it doesn't exist, it'll run After Effects. Otherwise, if the window does exist, it'll focus After Effects. And then you got other applications which can have multiple windows open. After Effects, you're not going to have more than one window open to that, so that doesn't have to be that complex. All right, so the application switcher for applications that can have more than one window open look like this in the script. So basically, you press the key that the application is associated with. If Control is held down, it'll just run Notepad, and it'll add this Notepad window to the auto hotkey group of Notepad windows. And that's for cycling through, basically. Otherwise, if Control is not held down, and if Notepad doesn't exist or isn't open, it'll run Notepad, add it to the group, and then return. If the window already exists and Notepad is already active, it'll tab through Notepad windows. If Notepad isn't active and windows exist, it'll just activate the last most active window of Notepad. So that's how that code works. There's a few parts in this that matter. Basically, you have to get the executable right. It can either be a full file path, or you can just do the executable name and hopefully it finds it. If you have like different versions of an application, then you're going to want to use the full file path. And for most cases, I would just use the full file path. The way you'd find that is you would use your task manager. So for After Effects, just open that up, right click, hit open file location. You can see here we have aftereffects.exe and it's in this file path. So we would just copy that file path, put it right there, take After Effects, copy that, and basically just add a / and aftereffects.exe, and this is your file path for running After Effects. And so that should work for finding any application exe. All right, let's try Vivaldi. So if you're not using Vivaldi, it's a really nice browser, in my opinion. I think it's really cool. Heard about it from a guy named Amin, and then I tried it out, and it turns out it's pretty sick. So I have the file path that I found using that technique I just showed. And then the other thing that matters is that you have to get the right AHK exe. And to get this exe name, you have to use something called Windows Spy. You can just press the Windows button, search Windows Spy. If you download AutoHotkey, you have this. So you'll see here ahk.exe, and whatever window you have focused, it'll find the associated ahk exe, or it'll find the ahk class. In some cases, the class works better than the exe, so just make sure to copy accordingly. So you can see actually I'm going to open up Vivaldi and just show that that's what that is. So you see I have this focused, so this ahk exe is vivaldi.exe. Cool. So basically shouldn't have done that. So basically I would copy that and put that here, 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 and here for this block of code. I will probably make a way to simplify this later, but for the meantime, this is the way I do it. The other thing that matters is that you have to have a variable that's specific to this application. So you may have to just change this to something else for these 4 variables. And that's just the AutoHotkey group for that type of application. Also, just make sure to set your hotkey to something that doesn't conflict with another hotkey. All right, so I did do the scroll wheel modifications in AutoHotkey because I wanted to do them in the Logitech gaming software, and I posted on a forum to try and get that, but I don't think that's going to happen, as I had mentioned before, like people cheating in video games by assigning fire to the scroll wheel or certain functions to the scroll wheel. And considering the Logitech gaming software is tailored to gamers, they're probably never going to put that function in there. And they've said before to other people asking for certain functions that they don't want to make the scripting API too powerful. And so I don't think that the scroll wheel remapping is ever going to be a thing in the LGS software. So that has to be done in AutoHotkey. And how I got Logitech, the Logitech gaming software and AutoHotkey to communicate is fucking baller. It's pretty crazy. Don't know if you care about this part, but it took me a lot of work to try and figure out how to remap the scroll wheel. Like I tried Logitech support, I tried software solutions, I tried USB sniffing and remapping, and I tried editing HID drivers, which is, I have no clue what I'm doing basically. And then I also tried hardware solutions. So if you take a look at this. I have another G903 that I have taken apart. So there's a scroll wheel, and I was gonna try and put like a wire on the scroll wheel terminals to some G keys, but then I'd be sacrificing some G keys. So I didn't like that idea either. This mouse I'm just replacing switches on, so nothing interesting going on there. All right, so yeah, I demonstrated that the scroll wheel, there are some tasks you can do a lot faster with it. If you do use the script, you will have to disable system shortcuts, and you do that here in this path here, and just make sure all these are off. Really just this one, because I use print screen, pause break, page up, and page down to allow the Logitech software to communicate without a hotkey. And the way that I'm doing that is pretty nuts. So let me show you that. So let's look at print screen. So basically I have that. Let's pull up this. So we see if a certain event, then press key print screen and release key print screen. Now that's happening very quickly. That is happening faster than a human could press that button, like press and release that button. And so basically, when print screen is pressed, the script will pause for a very short amount of time. I think it's like a millisecond. And you cannot press and let go of a key, or it's very difficult to press and release a key in a millisecond. So after that period of time, it checks, hey, is that button still held down? If it's not still held down, then that key came from the Logitech gaming software. And so then it executes code that basically tells it to shift its mode in this case. So it's basically, I just sent a message from LGS to AutoHotkey without sacrificing the key, because it's basically if that key is still held down, it'll just send that key. And for print screen, I just disabled it because I never use it anyway. So you can see here for page down, if the key state is still down after that like millisecond or two, it'll send the normal keystroke. So yeah, it's essentially 4 things of code. There's the master macro script, which handles all the application-specific macros, and also includes these 2 scripts, the global functions and the mouse wheel mods. And you can see here that I have includes for those, so like include global functions and include 1PG mod. That's just what I called it when I started it. It's not, I could probably rename it. And then you have the script for that runs the mouse, basically. This allows multi-button macros and gets the communication between AutoHotkey and the mouse. I think that is all I want to show. So yeah, I'll put my code on GitHub. I'll make a version that's a bit cleaner, but for the time being, I'm just showing this, so I don't really have time to do that right now. Hope you like it.